Reincarnation is the belief that the spirit after biological death begins a new life in a new body. The following case of reincarnation is about a young boy called Chad Luke. In 1978, when Kathy Luke was just a teenager, she became pregnant. She later gave birth to a son who she named James. Unfortunately, the father of the child showed no interest and was uninvolved, and the young couple soon separated. When James was only 16 months old, he was diagnosed with aggressive neuroblastoma cancer. Over the next year, James endured multiple painful treatments and surgeries as doctors desperately tried to save the child's life. Unfortunately, things got worse and his health deteriorated, and by April of 1980, James had 17 tumours in his left leg and large tumours behind both eyes and ears. One tumour caused complete blindness in his left eye, while another severely distorted the left side of his face. During treatment, doctors inserted an intravenous line into the right side of his neck, leaving a distinct surgical scar. After many months in the hospital, Kathy was devastated when James' doctors told her they could do no more for him. They sent the dying 2-year-old home to live out his final days. Kathy cared for James in the last weeks of his life, and one day, perhaps sensing his mother's profound grief, said to her, "Don't cry for me," and a short time later, he passed away in his mother's arms. Troubled by what her son had said, she nevertheless followed her son's last request and did not cry, and instead bottled up her anguish. Over the next few years, Kathy endeavoured to rebuild her life, and eventually found a new partner and married a man called Don. The couple had a daughter who they named Katie, but sadly that marriage failed, and after only 4 years, the couple divorced. Sometime later, she met another man called Billy, and this relationship was successful. And in 1992, 12 years after her first child James had passed away, she gave birth to a boy, whom they named Josh. Later that year, she became pregnant again, but unfortunately, this pregnancy did not go as smoothly. When Kathy awoke after a cesarean section to deliver her third son, doctors greeted her with troubling news. Her newly born child appeared to have been born completely blind in his left eye. Looking closer at the newborn, Kathy noticed what appeared to be a surgical scar on the right side of the infant's neck, exactly where James had had an intravenous line inserted. Even more strikingly, she spotted a cyst in the same position behind the baby's right ear, where doctors had once performed a biopsy on toddler James. Kathy called her newly born son Chad, but then an uncanny feeling washed over her. She felt a powerful connection to the baby, as if they shared a bond from a past life, and this was not a feeling she'd experienced with her other children. As she looked into Chad's eyes, she felt certain that this was the soul of her beloved James returned to her. These realizations were coming from a woman who was raised in a strict religious Baptist home in America's Bible Belt, who had never read any books about reincarnation. In fact, the very concept of reincarnation was heretical to her faith, so she chose to keep her feelings to herself. As Chad got older, other signs started to appear, and at 4 years of age, Chad begged his mother to visit their other apartment where Kathy had lived with her first son James when he was alive. Chad was even able to describe the apartment she had lived in, and also asked for specific toys that had belonged to the deceased child, which they didn't have in their current house. When his mother asked him why he wanted to revisit the old apartment, he replied, "Because that's where I left you, Mum." This was the first indication to his mother that Chad knew about James' life. During the next couple of years, Chad occasionally talked about the life of James, which his mother didn't question him about, and she just waited for him to bring it up. She didn't want to influence him in any way, but also because she had no idea what to say to him. On another occasion, Kathy showed Chad an old photograph of a deceased son James, and Chad's eyes opened wide with recognition, saying, "That's me. I've been wishing for that picture because it's me. Can I have it?" Possibly the most convincing incident occurred when Chad was 6 years of age, when he approached his 10-year-old brother and commented out of the blue, "When I was 2 years old, I got so sick that I couldn't keep down 7-Up, he said solemnly. "Then I died and came back. When I die again someday, I'll come back again." Apparently his brother ran out of the room frightened by what his brother had just said. Chad's mother was totally shocked because nobody could have known about James' struggle to keep down the fizzy soft drink called 7-Up shortly before he died. Her son's comment was as direct as it could be. Kathy was desperate for some kind of explanation as to what her son was saying. She found Dr. Jim Tucker's book about reincarnation and decided to contact Dr. Tucker. For the next year and a half, Kathy and Dr. Tucker would regularly talk on the phone, where Kathy would keep Dr. Tucker up to date about any comments Chad would make about James' previous life. Eventually, Dr. Tucker asked if she would be willing to meet with the renowned Dr. Ian Stevenson. Dr. Ian Stevenson was known for his research into cases of reincarnation and would relish the opportunity to investigate such an intriguing case. A short time later, Dr. Stevenson and Jim Tucker met with Kathy and her family and studied the case, and together they meticulously documented Chad Luke's case. Kathy and Dr. Tucker discussed why James may have come back to be with her again. Did he feel unfinished with his life when he told his mother he wanted to go back to a former apartment because he left her there? Souls sometimes return to be with the same family because of strong bonds of love. Sometimes a soul feels that they're needed, they can help the family, or they need to make amends. There could be many reasons why the soul returns to be with the same people, especially if they die young. They also discussed the possibility that the blindness in Chad's eye, which had no physiological basis, could be healed if Kathy talked to Chad and explained to him that she knew he was back and that he was now in a new body. It had worked in other cases. It was certainly worth a try and couldn't do any harm. After many meetings and discussions, both Dr. Stevenson and Dr. Tucker found that there were many uncanny similarities between Chad's current and past life as James. Eventually, with the assistance and guidance of Dr. Tucker, Kathy was able to encourage her son Chad to talk about his past life. She said that one evening she sat Chad down on her lap and said, "I don't know everything, but I know you were here before and you were a very sick little boy, and you had to go away so you could come back in a healthy body." She reassured him that his soul had likely returned to be close with her again because he'd loved and missed his mother and wanted to return to her. The young boy sat calmly on his mother's lap as she spoke, and when she finished talking, he simply said to her, "I know, Mama." Then he smiled and ran off to play, looking more relaxed and carefree than he had in his short years. 2 days later, Kathy received amazing news. Her son excitedly told her he could suddenly see out of his blind left eye. She tested him by having him hold his hand over his right eye and holding up her fingers. He quickly told her how many fingers she was holding up. She tested him again later that day. To her amazement, he could now see something with his left eye. This was the first time he had any vision in that eye. Kathy then took Chad to the ophthalmologist to have his eyes tested, and they were able to confirm that Chad's vision had improved. For Kathy Luke, the grief and the guilt she had long suffered over losing her son James suddenly lifted, of having James' soul reborn into a family. Cases like this ran counter to people's religious beliefs, where some family members refused to believe it, even after a child made startling statements about the deceased's life that no one had ever mentioned to the child. This particular case, and many other similar cases, challenges widely held assumptions that there is a long or set interval between lives. It also suggests that there is flexibility as to when the soul, spirit, or consciousness joins the body.